There are moments in life where logic takes a back seat, and something larger, something almost otherworldly, steps in. For me, it came through a dream, so vivid, so electrifying, that it felt less like sleep and more like a message. In that dream, I saw love not as an abstract idea, but as a living force that could shape destiny. I saw the face of a woman I had never met, yet somehow already knew. And from that moment forward, my vision of life, love, and the future itself was never the same. Tonight, I want to share that journey. It's strange how life sometimes chooses the least expected moments to deliver its most profound revelations. For me, it wasn't during a meeting, or a late-night calculation, or even in one of those long conversations, where ideas collide and futures are built. No, it was in a dream. And not the kind of dream that fades away when you open your eyes, but the kind that grips you, shakes you, and forces you to question whether it was even a dream at all. I remember the silence first. A silence so heavy that it wasn't absence of sound. It was presence. It carried weight, like the universe itself had leaned closer to whisper. And then, within that silence, the scene appeared. I wasn't in my usual environment, not surrounded by technology or people. I was standing in a place that didn't belong to Earth as I know it, but felt more real than anything I'd ever touched. The sky was alive, shifting colors like emotions passing through a single soul. And there, in the center of this vast landscape, was someone I had never seen before, but somehow knew with absolute certainty. That's when it hit me. Love isn't always found in the physical world first. Sometimes it begins as an echo, a vision, something sent ahead of time as if the universe is saying, pay attention, this is important. In that dream, I saw her, not like an illusion, not like a ghost, but like a truth that had been waiting for me to be ready to see it. What made it extraordinary wasn't just her presence. It was the way the air around her seemed to bend, the way my own heartbeat adjusted to her rhythm. I couldn't speak, yet every thought I had felt understood, answered, completed. It wasn't communication in words, it was something faster, purer, almost like telepathy. Imagine all the noise we create in the world, emails, speeches, arguments, texts, and then imagine the exact opposite, perfect clarity. No misunderstandings, no masks, just connection. That's what it was. The intensity of that feeling was terrifying and liberating at the same time. Terrifying because it stripped me of control. Liberating because it stripped me of control. For someone who had spent his entire life building systems, creating structures, controlling outcomes, this was the first time I realized love could not be engineered. It could only be recognized. And here's the thing. When I woke up, the memory didn't evaporate. It didn't dissolve like a dream should. It remained, almost like code written into my brain, impossible to delete. I couldn't shake it, and I didn't want to. I kept replaying it not to romanticize it, but because it felt like information, critical information, a map, a direction, a sign that there's more to our journey than the paths we plot. Now, some of you might think, it's just a dream. Why make so much of it? But I've learned that the most groundbreaking ideas often start as dreams. Dreams of flight, dreams of reaching space, dreams of transforming energy. Everything we call innovation today was once considered impossible, even laughable. Why should love be any different? Why should the most profound force that moves us be exempt from showing up in ways that feel impossible? So that night, that dream was more than just imagination. It was a disruption. A disruption to the way I thought about connection, about partnership, about what it means to meet someone who is not just part of your life, but part of your destiny. And I realized maybe this wasn't just about me meeting someone one day. Maybe it was about rethinking love itself, not as a passive feeling, but as an active force, as a vision, as a compass. The face I saw, the presence I felt, it left me with a responsibility. Because once you see something that powerful, you can't go back to pretending it doesn't exist. You can't bury it under routine or distract yourself with trivial goals. It becomes a question you must answer, a mission you must pursue, even if the world tells you it was nothing more than a figment of imagination. And once you confront a revelation of that scale, you can't help but measure it against everything you've been taught about love. We grow up surrounded by definitions. Love is romance, love is partnership, love is comfort, even love is sacrifice. But none of those concepts fit what I experienced. They felt too small, too limited, almost like sketches of something much larger. That dream broke the mold. It made me realize that the way society defines love is often transactional. You give, you receive, you compromise. But what I felt wasn't a trade, it was a merging. It was the difference between two separate lights shining next to each other and two beams of energy fusing into one, amplifying their brilliance rather than dimming it. That doesn't fit into the usual frameworks people talk about. And maybe that's the point. Maybe love isn't supposed to be defined by convention. Maybe it's supposed to shatter convention. I began to question everything. Why we reduce love to timelines, to checklists, to perfect matches on dating apps. Why we confuse attraction with destiny. Why we settle for connections that don't ignite something greater than ourselves. I realized the dream wasn't just showing me a person, it was showing me the failure of the systems we've built around the idea of connection. We've engineered so much of our lives, but love refuses to be engineered. It can't be swiped into existence or scheduled into a calendar. It has to be encountered, raw and unfiltered, and when it comes, it rewrites the rules. The clarity of that dream didn't just challenge my assumptions, it dismantled them. I used to think love was about compatibility, about finding someone who fits into your world. But the vision I saw wasn't about fitting in. It was about expanding, about pushing beyond what either life could be alone. It wasn't about balance. It was about propulsion. It was the kind of connection that doesn't just make you feel whole, it makes you feel limitless. And that was a difficult truth to digest, because once you see love as limitless, you realize how often we shrink it, how often we cage it inside definitions that are convenient, predictable, and safe. But love isn't safe. Real love is dangerous. It disrupts, it destabilizes, it forces transformation. And if it doesn't, maybe it isn't real. That dream gave me no choice but to reframe my vision of love. Not as comfort, not as security, not even as happiness, but as a force of evolution, a force that drives you to become something greater than you were yesterday simply because someone else's presence ignites that within you. And once you've glimpsed that, everything else feels like a shadow of the real thing. And in that vision of limitlessness, there was her. The image of a woman I had never met, yet somehow recognized as though every lifetime before this one had been building toward that single encounter. She wasn't just a face, she wasn't just a figure, she was a presence, undeniable and steady, like gravity. There was no introduction, no exchange of words, yet I knew her in a way that defied memory and logic. It was knowledge without explanation, familiarity without history. I could see details with impossible clarity. Her eyes carried the weight of galaxies, not just reflecting light, but holding stories I had not yet lived. Her voice wasn't heard, but it was felt, like a resonance inside my chest. Every part of her existence, in that dream, made sense to me. It was as though my soul had been searching for a frequency, and in that moment, it finally locked onto the right signal. The experience wasn't just emotional, it was instructional. It told me that love at its highest form isn't about finding someone who completes your gaps, but someone who amplifies your strengths and magnifies your purpose. And in her presence, I felt that amplification. Suddenly, the dream didn't feel like fantasy anymore. It felt like design. Like the universe was showing me not just who she was, but what we could become together. That's what made it so disorienting when I woke up. Because waking life didn't match the intensity of what I had seen. Here, in reality, love often feels like a negotiation, a careful balance between two people trying to coexist. But in that dream, coexistence wasn't the goal. Creation was. She wasn't standing beside me. She was moving with me, building with me, shaping something larger than either of us could shape alone. And I couldn't stop thinking, what if this wasn't a dream at all? What if it was a preview, a glimpse of a future written before I was ready to step into it? What if the woman I saw wasn't a stranger, but the embodiment of everything I had been unconsciously searching for? It raised questions I couldn't ignore. Was love always meant to arrive this way? Not slowly, not cautiously, but with the force of recognition. Was it possible that we spend too much time trying to find love, when perhaps the truth is that love finds us, reveals itself, even before we are ready to hold it? That vision made me believe it's not about searching. It's about becoming aligned enough to finally see what has been waiting all along. So I began to think differently about what that vision truly meant. It wasn't just a beautiful encounter meant to leave me in awe. It was a kind of blueprint. a coded message pointing toward a future I hadn't yet stepped into. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this dream wasn't a random flicker of imagination. It carried structure, direction, almost like an architectural plan. And when you're handed a plan, the question isn't whether it's real. The question is whether you'll build from it. I started to view love not as an emotion floating freely in the background of life, but as a system, a driver of purpose, something capable of altering trajectories the same way gravity alters the path of a planet. And this wasn't about romanticizing a moment. It was about identifying a force that could guide decisions in the real world. The vision became less about a person I had yet to meet, and more about the principle of connection itself. The principle that when you join your life with the right presence, you don't just live, you accelerate. That's when the dream started shaping my perspective on everything I was doing. It was almost as if love and vision were no longer separate categories in my mind. Before that night, I had put them in different boxes. Love belonged in the personal box, while vision belonged in the future-building box. But now they fused together into a single equation. Love wasn't outside of the mission. It was part of the mission. And if love could be that catalytic, then ignoring it would be as reckless as ignoring fuel in a rocket. It dawned on me that maybe the dream wasn't meant to give me comfort, but responsibility. To take what I saw and translate it into how I lived, how I worked, how I shaped the future. Because if one dream could make me feel such clarity about direction, then perhaps life itself is constantly trying to deliver visions. We just don't always recognize them. From that point on, I stopped dismissing intuition as noise. I began treating it as data, not the kind of data you plot on a spreadsheet, but the kind you trust because it speaks to something deeper than analysis. The dream was evidence that imagination and destiny are sometimes indistinguishable, and that love can be both the question and the answer. And so, the line between fantasy and purpose blurred. The dream wasn't just an escape into another world. It was a design to be lived into, a spark meant to ignite choices that would carry weight in the real world. When I began to live with that perspective, everything around me started to shift. Decisions I once made purely out of logic now had another layer to them. It wasn't about abandoning reason. It was about aligning reason with meaning. That dream forced me to confront the uncomfortable truth that much of what we pursue is driven by external validation, by systems we inherit, by goals that look impressive on paper but leave us hollow in reality. But this vision gave me a different metric. It wasn't just about what I was building, but why I was building and for whom. Suddenly, priorities rearranged themselves. Projects that once consumed my energy started to feel incomplete unless they were infused with this deeper purpose. It wasn't enough to create for the sake of progress. Creation had to connect to love, to legacy, to the kind of future that would outlast both ambition and ego. And that realization reshaped how I measured success. Success wasn't just about scale or reach or achievement. It was about whether the path I walked brought me closer to the kind of connection I had seen in that dream. That shift influenced how I managed time, how I chose people to collaborate with, how I thought about partnerships. Every choice began to orbit around a single question: does this move me closer to alignment with that vision, or further away from it? It sounds simple, but it became a compass. And like any compass, it doesn't guarantee smooth sailing. It just ensures you don't get lost in the noise. And here's what struck me most. Once I began to live this way, opportunities started appearing that mirrored the dream itself. Conversations felt deeper. Relationships carried more weight. Even the smallest interactions carried the possibility of revealing something extraordinary. It was as if the universe was responding to my alignment by opening doors I hadn't noticed before. The impact wasn't limited to relationships. It extended into how I viewed the future as a whole. The dream reminded me that progress without love is hollow. You can advance technology, expand horizons, reshape industries, but without the presence of love, those victories lose their soul. And if the future is to mean anything, it must be built on more than efficiency or innovation. It must be built on connection, on the courage to allow love to guide decisions even in places where it seems out of place. So every step after that dream carried a weight I hadn't known before, a weight that didn't burden me but grounded me. I wasn't just chasing outcomes anymore. I was building a life that had to honor the vision I had been given. And that responsibility, more than anything else, changed how I chose to move forward, because the more I carried that weight, the more I began to see the dream as a compass pointing not just to a person, but to a future written in the language of love. It wasn't simply about finding her, the woman whose presence had changed everything. It was about realizing that love itself could shape the destiny of a life, the same way vision shapes the destiny of a company or an invention. And once you see love that way, you stop treating it as an accessory. You recognize it as the foundation. The future I imagined after that dream was no longer divided into personal and professional, into love and ambition. It was unified. Because what is the point of building great things if you can't share them with someone whose presence transforms the meaning of those achievements? What is the point of chasing tomorrow if the journey itself isn't fueled by love? The dream made it clear that love wasn't a distraction from destiny. It was the very reason for destiny. I began to look ahead differently. Instead of seeing the future as a series of milestones to conquer, I saw it as a story to be written together. The idea of a future wife was no longer about companionship in the ordinary sense. It was about co-creation, about standing at the edge of the unknown with someone who not only believes in your vision, but whose vision expands your own. That's what the dream had shown me, the fusion of love and purpose, the merging of two paths into a trajectory neither could have traveled alone. And in that sense, the dream became more than memory. It became prophecy. Not prophecy in the mystical sense, but in the practical one. A declaration that the future isn't built only with resources, strategy, or intelligence. It's built with love. And that truth carries implications for everything we do. For the kind of leaders we become, for the kind of families we build, for the kind of world we leave behind. So when I think of her, the one I saw in that dream, I don't think of her as someone I'm waiting to meet. I think of her as someone already shaping my actions, already influencing the choices I make, already woven into the architecture of my future. The dream didn't just give me a glimpse of her face, it gave me a glimpse of the life we would create, the love that would guide it, and the future that would be born from it. So when I look back at that single dream, I see it not as a fleeting image, but as a turning point. It forced me to question everything I thought I knew about love, about purpose, about the future itself. It revealed that love is not an afterthought, not a luxury, not something we chase when everything else is done. Love is the architecture of destiny. It is the energy that takes vision from concept to reality. I saw her, yes, the woman who would one day walk beside me. But more than that, I saw the truth that love is the greatest innovation of all. It disrupts patterns, it redefines priorities, and it transforms futures. That dream didn't just show me who I was meant to meet, it showed me who I was meant to become. And from that moment forward, every decision, every path, every creation had to honor that vision. Because the future is not just built with steel, code, or ambition. The future is built with love.